Mine's good. I was having trouble hearing Zip.
Very good.
Okay. I'm just gonna go on mute for a second until we're ready to go.
I'm just making sure that my voice isn't some scratchy ass mess.
No, it sounds good.
You're good.
It's not a mess like when it was last time.
No, you're fine.
All right, let's go. I might take a little longer due to the fact that I have a fracture debuff IRL.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
It's fine. It'll get better within like a month. Let's see, let me just check that I have all my shit together. Make sure my desk isn't an absolute disaster zone, and we can start.
Sorry, you're gonna hear my chair. It's a bit old. I'm stretching.
I think my guys see if they wanted to join.
Let's see.
Yeah, I'm glad.
If you want to introduce yourself while we're waiting for everybody to flow in, you can do that.
Sure.
Like just talk if someone's been living under a rock for the past month or so.
Yeah. Well, for some reason, I don't know who I am. I am Critique. I also prefer to go by Stevie. Whatever works for you guys, though, it's fine by me. I am one of the developers for Starscape. I typically run the asset team, and I also coordinate social media and marketing and all those things. I'm also the graphic designer as well as the narrative designer for the game. So those are all my shoes that I fill.
A narrative designer, as in like lore-esque kind of things.
Lore and just storytelling in general. So mostly for upcoming mission updates, I'll be the one who determines what the narratives will be. So
And
yeah.
also, I said the L word, and now everybody's freaking out about it.
No, you should not have said that.
This is gonna be
What have you
great.
done?
You're not allowed to say that word. It's banned.
I now never have
no,
to say this
no,
word
no.
again, otherwise the panel chat will just light up.
By the way, everybody in panel chat right now, without you spamming the law, if you genuinely have any ideas, if they're good, I'll like gather everybody's ideas at the end and I'll say them like that are good and that are possible. Not things that will crash Roblox servers.
Is this being recorded, by the way? Are we doing a recording?
I have no clue, Jonas. Jonas is just not talking today. I'm definitely not recording.
Let me just wake him up real
I'm
quick,
not.
send him a message.
All right. Oh man.
Well, that was weird.
I assume technical difficulties?
Yeah. Jesus.
Fistus doing up here?
I have no idea. Oh, I must have missed it when I added you.
How did I
Fistus,
get up
shoot!
here?
Get out! Get out!
Get the
Please.
fuck out of here.
Get out! Oh man. Who's accepting all of these different requests? Also, Jonas, give me perm. Oh, it's locked now. Hold on, we're having mild technical difficulties.
Yeah, what the fuck just happened?
Oh god.
Going well so far. absolutely flawless.
I am currently typing with one hand. So, yeah, this is great.
I'm not sure who all the speakers are. So
I'm gonna be talking on behalf of the chat, as long as they don't get too rowdy. Yet this does not mean that you guys can spam random shit.
who are the other speakers though? Do we need to reset this or what? It's being weird.
Well, now you can rejoin the panel, I assume.
Here, let me exit.
Hold on.
I can just become a speaker, so I guess if the people who are speaking can do that, that should be fine. I'm just not sure who and all is supposed to be
All right.
up here. Yeah. I shall wait.
This is great. I love it. The first time critique an actual important person steps into the server. It's just
Okay,
shit show. All
it's
right.
just it's,
All right. Give us a couple seconds while we, work on it.
yeah, no problem. I'm not in a rush right now, so I got about
I guess everybody
hours.
might shut the fuck up. Jonas, how about you just give me admin perms for a couple seconds and I'll figure this out. Oh my god, this is a mess. I guess you can go talk in the shit show that's general for a minute. Let me go see what that. No, I don't want to. Jonas's mic is not working. Oh, panel's locked as well for some reason. All right, panel's open again, apparently.
I'm so confused. Okay, so who's on the list of speakers? Do we have a speaker list?
I am going to be speaking on behalf of the community. That's all I know about it. Basically, I'll just be watching panel chat and posting actually good questions to you.
Okay. And then are there going to be other speakers?
Why is
Individual.
Hello? Hello?
Hello. Hi, we can
Hey,
hear you.
Jonah.
Hi.
No.
Dude. Am I clear? Is my voice okay?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my-
your voice is okay. Jonas, give me perm so I can sort this mess out.
I
You're
I
10 minutes behind schedule.
That's totally my fault. I joined on my computer while I'm talking on my phone and it totally screwed everything up.
Good job.
Yeah, this is all my fault. Here, I'm gonna give you just temporary admin. I don't know what that'll do,
Thank you.
but I might let you come up. Okay, so we have like a general outline for how we want to do this. Again, I'm super sorry, dude. I started having a freak out because I was like, what the hell's going on?
It's fine. It doesn't impede my day in any way. So
Oh, and he disappeared.
what happened?
All right, so while we're at it, let's talk. Let's follow the what's it called? We are going to follow the outline because I have nothing better to do. Jonas is having problems. This is a mess. Let's go.
Okay, well,
We
as long as you got terms, you're good. So
Yeah.
I'll trust you
All right.
to invite speakers up and
We
stuff.
talked about who you were, your critique, the whole thing.
Yes.
If you're still haven't learned,
No.
this is critique. He does Starscape shit.
Yeah, I can do a refresh if you want, just for all the people who might.
No, you don't need to. If they didn't listen, too bad for them.
Okay.
Are we good now?
All right, we're getting to the piss button talk, according to whoever the fuck it was. Faction stations, because people wanted to talk about that a lot.
Sure.
What's your idea on them for right now, like at the current moment? Like stations in general, player stations.
Well, we're starting with player outposts, as you all know, which are going to be coming in June. Our general timeline for stations is we want to do not like a broad release, but rather something that's spread out over time where we can gradually add new features as we go. And one of those features is going to be faction stations. So the player outposts, while they will have a focus on more individual and small group mechanics, the larger faction stations will require a much larger group of people to manage them. In terms of features, I would personally like to see things like spawning points, rally points at those stations where all of your members can set it as their default spawn. I want it to feel pretty large as well, so it'll definitely be a lot bigger than the player outposts. And I think, if do you have any questions about like specific features, or do you just want me to like give you the rundown of just some general ideas that we had in mind?
I'm watching panel chat at the same time to make sure.
No
Yeah, I'm doing the
problem.
same.
Yeah.
It's a bit chaotic.
It's a little bit, but specifically, are can outposts sit in like wild? Do outposts only sit in wild, or can they sit like anywhere?
So outposts and stations will all be set in wild space, and just wild space. We have no immediate plans to change that. We definitely want wild space to be the place where players spend most of their time if they're going to be doing faction-related activities outside of the NPC faction warfare. Because that's what Contested is for. Building a community outside of the inner and outer core is a really appealing idea for a lot of us.
There's a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Will player outposts be upgraded past like an outpost stage? Will there be like?
Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah, so player outposts, I think we have it in mind. If it becomes a possibility, we could add some small modular things to them. However, player outposts will probably stay as outposts. Anything that you upgrade, it'll upgrade to a faction station, because we don't see a reason for there to be stations much larger than the outposts that we are constructing for individual players and their friends. It doesn't make sense in our minds because of the upkeep that would be required to sustain it. That gives us the ability to make faction stations much more of a group effort and really focus on those group mechanics and give people more group content. You know, it's part of our effort to move away from some of the solo content that we've been putting out over the past several months.
Sweet. That's good to know.
So,
I-
are all these things? I mean, so you've given kind of like a general time frame, right?
Mhm.
You think these are all like feasible given it?
Well, we don't really have an established time frame for faction stations, but for player outposts, I think we have given ourselves a really feasible time frame, and I'm keeping it broad when it comes down to like the specific days and stuff, because just to be able to say it's coming out in June, it gives us the leeway to assess where we are at, because currently we are ahead of schedule, right? So if we say we're releasing in June and we stay ahead of schedule, it would mean that we could then possibly release it a bit earlier in June. But at the same time, if anything goes wrong and if someone's schedule gets fucked up, or a couple of people fall ill, it then gives us the ability to say, oh, well, it's going to have to come out a bit later in June. So we are, I think for the foreseeable future, I think for every update, we're going to stick to a broad monthly commitment. And then as we get closer to the testing process for each update, then we'll be able to say, okay, here's the exact day.
Right.
It's extremely difficult, and I don't know why Keth has done this in the past, because if you commit to a day too early in the development process, there's too many variables to account for, way too many variables to account for, and I think it just puts him under a lot more pressure than he needs to be. So keeping it to the scope of the overall month, I think it puts a lot of our developers at ease and allows us to be more productive.
So if you could just remind me, so when is the like unofficial anticipated like area for when you want to release the player outposts? Is it at the same time as faction, or?
No, we're looking at June for just the player outposts. Faction stations, we have yet to deliver a precise timeline. I think how station stuff is going to work from now on is going to be it won't be like announced in the form of like a big update coming. It'll be sprinkled here and there. Like if we do anything to stations, we'll just kind of announce it in the dev blog, unless it's something huge. Like again, faction stations are coming. We will probably include that in a direct video. But we are going to add any new outpost / station features just gradually. So we will always be working on station stuff all the time.
Yeah.
There won't be a time where we're not. It's going to be like ships, always working on ships. Those are always going to be something that is in the back of our minds. It's just not going to be. I think with this initial release, it's just the sole focus of development right now. It's the only thing that we're really working on besides getting the relays and the police system squared away.
Yeah. So you mentioned that they were going to be like they're more industrial, I think. Is that what I?
Yeah, that's the plan. I think, and it won't just be stations and outposts, right? Like we will probably look at what we can do for structures in general. We have talked about temporary structures that are resource sinks that can be used by individuals and also by factions for advantageous reasons, be it industrial or combat, whatever is required.
Yeah. So this is something that I was personally talking. By the way, was there any speakers who wanted to talk on that? Talk more about that? Had any more questions?
I did have a few questions because I have got some DMs from some
Yeah.
people. So one question was, how do you plan to revive the player base? Because as you know, it's a bit dead right now. There's not many active factions per se up, and there's not much PvP happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to take steps to increase engagement. Reviving it will be a small. It'll be a lot of small changes that gradually stack up on each other. Things like uh, or I guess player outposts and faction stations are a given. Like that'll drive interest, but you can't just depend on that alone, right? I think adding other mechanics, such as some faction warfare, NPC faction warfare fixes. Victory mechanics was one thing. More rewards for loyalty points. And another thing is adding support ships, things that have specific functions that would be more usable in a faction
hello.
setting.
Hello.
So, yeah, that's our general approach to that. Lots of individual changes that stack up on top of each other to form, a more engaged player base. I don't think there will be a be all end all solution that
Yeah,
just
no, of course.
fixes it right away. And I don't see stations as being that either. It's all part of a larger process to revitalize the fan base.
Thank you for that.
So I was talking with my personal faction. We were kind of thinking, like, I mean, do you believe that like factions will kind of? I know you were talking on this, but I know that we wanted to unite as a faction around only a handful of kind of like systems, right? So
Mhm.
my faction personally has like 100, 150, 100, like 200 in-game members, 150 to 200. And we're thinking that at least half of them, would be super interested in kind of uniting around certain like quadrants of the space. I mean, in your eyes, do you think that like having all these player stations, do you think like a faction or like a large faction like mine might be able to fit within like 5 to 10 systems? You think that's
Yeah,
realistic?
yeah, you could have. See, here's the thing, right? We have it in mind to make the faction stations, and these will be bigger hubs for your faction. But if you want to have a network of smaller player outposts, it's totally feasible. We don't know if we're going to do multiple outposts per orbit slot, but I know that it will typically work whereby the player who owns that orbit slot will be able to whitelist construction if we do decide to take that route.
Mm.
But I'm a big fan of one station, or sorry, one outpost per slot. So with that being said, multiple planets in one system, multiple orbit slots per planet, you could probably fit quite a few outposts in one system.
Yeah, that's definitely something like I'm looking forward to. Um, this is something that we played around with. I mean, we were playing around with this sort of thing as far back as like late summer of last year when there was all the station hype and whatnot.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was definitely a question of whether it's reasonable to expect that many people and so few systems. Um,
Mhm.
oh, that's awesome
Well,
if that's what's up.
strategically speaking, it might be beneficial for some factions to not consolidate um, too many outposts in one area. I would encourage people to spread out whenever they can. That way, in case you get caught off guard.
If I could make a suggestion, instead of having systems to encourage players not grouping up to the point where, like, because I feel like one of the things we should focus on is preventing large factions from just stacking up on a system and these massive standoffs where it's just 50 players versus 50 players daring the other to move. I don't think that's engaging gameplay whatsoever. I think I think it'll be much better if we are able to uh, not necessarily force, but heavily encourage a much more distributed playstyles, like having like a timer system where you have to take over every or multiple areas within a certain amount of time, forcing
Mhm.
like athletes to have to split up and allowing for more like tactical maneuvering.
Mhm.
Uh, on the other hand, though, I would say that like fleets are definitely peak Starscape, but I don't think like massive death blobs are peak Starscape. You can have like a relatively large fleet which is distributed throughout various systems. I feel like that would be a lot more engaging than just massive death blob go burr with every single person you can marshal.
So are you speaking mostly about warfare in contested space, or I'm just a little confused. Can you clarify?
Yes, I mean that. Yes, to an extent that, but also for systems involving faction stations.
Okay.
Are you saying
Generally, I just want the focus to move away from massive fleets to much relatively smaller fleets, which of like 5-10 people. And there could obviously be a lot of these fleets running around, but moving the focus to these relatively smaller scales battles.
here's the thing. These days 5
I-
to 10 person fleets are considered large.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
Well,
like
these days, yeah.
Also,
in the older
listen,
I think a lot of people want like large fleet combat.
yeah,
'Cause
and the issue with
it's
that is that the game population isn't high enough to accommodate such a thing.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah,
that's
very
another thing
true.
I'd like to just quickly bring up. I don't think that there should be an expansion of wild systems that just spreads out the player population even more. In fact, I think that the wild systems should be cut down in half. In fact, and secure, unsecure, everything. We should just have less systems in the game simply because there's just not enough players. If the game grows tremendously and stays that way, sure, add more systems. But I think we should be able to see more people in places that aren't like the primary hotspots like Gadensee or like contested systems or along the border, etc.
I see your point. I genuinely think that the game will grow. I could talk to Keth about possibly holding off on the wild expansion, or at least reducing it if he does indeed want to carry on with that. But I am also anticipating that our new means of promoting, marketing the game, and also fixing our onboarding will help us with player retention and also increase our overall player base. Because we are taking steps, like we are heading towards that goal of increasing our player base. So we have to consider that as well. But you are right. We wouldn't want to do that prematurely as well. In
Right.
terms of the fleet combat stuff that Rack was talking about,
It's one thing I do want to specify. Maybe having like large fleet combat in like FW is fine, but where it is just like going to be like a one massive fleet versus another. And but what I'm more focusing on is like especially with faction warfare or with like proper faction stations and such, is that I don't want large factions to necessarily have too much of an advantage over small factions. I
well,
would I would like
I-
it for it to be relatively easy for for smaller factions to like hold versus larger factions. I do think like because having like relatively small elite factions is always going to have a disadvantage over like a large faction who just kind of got those
It's not about size. It's about
well, it can be.
skill. It's
It
more
can
about
be.
the veterans bullying the not like literally bullying, but
I just don't
they like to
want.
utterly annihilate the new
if
guys,
I
and
may,
it discourages them.
if I may,
Even with
I
insurance, it's not
think the
it's
other
about
point
relativism here.
I mean, there's got to be some advantage for large factions simply because they should get a reward for being large. Like, you don't want a faction of like 10 players of just people who are like at the same school to just be able to like annihilate like a major faction fleet that's been around since Alpha. I mean,
But on the
there has
other
to
hand, you
be
don't want
some
just like
ultimate
5 large factions and then like there's no room
Well-
to make your own faction.
the thing is, I think that the problem with the current fleet warfare system is that it is extremely linear. I'm having a hard time kind of comprehending the essence of the question, mainly because within my mind, like I know what changes I want to implement, and I can kind of speak to that. In that, the way that it currently works is you bring your biggest ships if you want to win, and if you have more people, you will almost certainly win. Or if you just catch someone off guard. That is how it works at the moment. Now, what I would like to see instead is, the same volume of players, maybe more, engaging in fleet combat, But as opposed to everyone bringing the same ship, the same ship, um, I would like it if there were maybe smaller, more versatile ships like bombers that can pose a threat to those larger ships. Something that would encourage people to diversify their fleet, and I think that would be a much more engaging fleet combat system already.
I already agree with that
Also
straight off the bat.
also having support ships, like vessels that aren't specifically meant or designed to be combat ships, but if they are present on the battlefield, are borderline essential if you want to have a win. And it could be a way of, kind of bridging the gap between large and small factions, but at the same time, you know, better strategy will be the thing that almost solidifies a victory if you also have the numbers to support it. So yeah, outnumbering people, it is what it is. It's like you expect that with larger factions, but you also don't want it to be completely impossible for a smaller faction to, give a good fight, so to speak, or at least do some damage. So, I guess that is my general view when it comes to things like fleet combat.
May I bring up a question about earlier that I didn't get a chance to raise?
Sure.
It's about the temporary structures. So, do we have any more information about those?
Oh, sorry, you cut out really briefly for me. Can you repeat your question?
For the temporary structures, do you have any
Ah,
more information about those?
Not really. They're mostly in like a discussion point in development right now. So I think what is preventing us from having further discussion right now is the fact that there aren't enough systems in the game to warrant those individual structures. We want to make sure that if we add things like modular improvements or isolated structures, that when players build them, it'll be for a purpose, and that they don't feel cheated. Because again, some of these would end up being temporary structures, right? I think making it so that the player. So here's a good example. If you are in, wild space and you're engaging some kind of drone enemy, and you build a support platform to help fight said enemy, right? Like a gun platform or something like that. It should be something that you want to do, and it should also be something that gets you a pretty significant reward, right? Right now, that kind of stuff isn't as rewarding as it should be. So there's no merit in us adding those temporary structures because people just won't use them. We need to make sure that the thing that they're using them for is a rewarding experience before we actually give players more supports in order to, attain those things.
Okay,
Does
I'd
that
like.
make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Although I would still say, still like to have them. Not so much the turret thing, but more of like a. Actually, the turret thing would be nice, but
Because
I feel like
a
the
mining
Galaxy
a mining
is,
platform would be probably the first thing that we would ever introduce.
yeah, that
That
or
that
cargo storage.
So,
yeah.
if I'm, would those kind of things be like modules or like subsystems or that kind of thing, or would they just be basically you select a blueprint, you just select some resources and you craft it? Because right now, this sort of sounding a lot like what I've heard a lot of people suggesting is basically carriers, where you're building a ship designed to carry like support ships, basically.
Well, like, I think they would probably function pretty similar to the actual outposts. Like, there's a chance that we could reuse the anchor point system, but the anchor points for these structures, you could probably place outside of orbit slots. You could pretty much place them anywhere. But that's still very speculative. We don't have the mechanics
Uh,
outlined yet. So I don't know what the limitations would be. I don't know the specifics of it, but I would definitely still like to see those kinds of structures be implemented. I think it would be highly beneficial.
May I add one little quick thing to that is that I think you guys are looking a little bit too big on a lot of these things. Because y'all are basically like the smallest thing y'all are thinking of is like something the size of a station. However, I'm thinking of something like more something the size of like a spice platform that you can't even enter.
Yeah. Oh no, that's what I'm thinking too. I like a mining platform would probably be the same size, if not smaller than a spice platform. I think that there should be even smaller structures than that.
Okay, there
Totally.
we go. We're on the
Yeah,
same page on that then.
oh yeah, but and I also want things that will be temporary in their lifespan and still resource sinks, right? Because that's really good for the economy. I think having things that are temporary that consume resources super good for the economy, as long as the reward for using them supersedes the actual cost.
And
I
hopefully we
think
could get one
that's
that's
like one of the
recyclable, as in like a lot more expensive one, but it can be reused multiple times, as in pick it up,
These,
move it.
yeah. I don't think
If
every
I
single.
can just
Oh.
pull from a one of the chats.
Yep.
Just on Outpost, if I could just kind of steer it for a sec. Sorry, Pat. Basically, people are asking is, this is the focus right now. Like, outposts are where people are. I mean, it's the reason the economy is broken outside of the game being, dead, is that everybody's hoarding, anticipating these stations. And really, like, the biggest concern is, they're going to be a huge investment as have been like, laid out, right? I mean, it's going to be a lot of resources to get it up real big. Is it going to be worth it?
Just to correct something there. These like I don't know if this is what you meant, but the actual outposts, you won't be able to grow them modularly. They won't grow on the outside. There will be internal features that you can upgrade, though, just to be clear. So some of those internal upgrades you can use resources for, and there will be credit sinks inside them as well. But can you repeat the second half of your question there?
I don't even remember what I said. I guess I mean, if instead of like that, maybe what are the things that I guess the main point was that like people are investing or are planning to invest a ton of resources because they've already invested so much time into preparing. I think everybody was under the pretense that it was going to be somewhere where they could sink a lot of these resources. And I know you just said that there will be internal things. Could you like maybe go into depth on how sinking these internal things are going to be? Should people have 100,000 correlite waiting and 20,000 acts in it?
I definitely think that people are going to have the sufficient resources to buy the base level outposts. Like they will be above destroyers. That I do know. That much I do know. The actual internal upgrades themselves. So I think things like the refinery and the factory terminals, as well as the fuel terminals, like those things will be upgradable. We have yet to decide if those things will be upgraded through credits or resources. I am personally a big fan of them being resource upgrades.
Yeah.
I don't imagine that those things would cost nearly as much as like a small fighter, but I do think that the cost would increase every time that you upgrade it. But obviously, I don't have the exact numbers on me. I'm just
Yeah,
going
I
based
know.
on
Yeah.
the size of the terminal and what bonuses it would give you, because the reason you upgrade the refinery, for instance, is so you get more from your raw unrefined ore. That is the whole purpose. And same goes for the factory. It's just meant to be a general increase of whatever features those terminals offer.
So really, people shouldn't expect to be able to invest hundreds of thousands of things. That's what you're saying. It's not a huge investment at the moment.
I would still say that it's a big investment. I think it'll still be a big investment, but I just don't have the precise numbers. But how much does I can't even, I wish I could even quantify it in terms of like how many destroyers would it be worth. I genuinely don't know. I'm trying to think of a way to answer it. Like I think people will have the ability to attain it if they are working individually. It'll take some time. It'll cost a lot more time than it would for a destroyer. And then they should also factor in the internal upgrades. And you will probably have about 3 levels of upgrades that you can attain for the things like terminals, for instance.
Critique. Give me a couple seconds. Hey guys, ping me, Jonas, Kevin instead of ping Critique himself. He's busy answering questions. He probably won't get to yours. I'll get
Probably
I'll
true.
get to it eventually. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Critique. Keep going.
No problem. I'll actually answer Admiral's point as well. Like, Admiral, we don't even know what a cruiser would cost, right? It's an impossible frame of reference for me to make. I have no idea. It's probably healthier for people to speculate anyway because it would be good for the economy. But the only thing I can really do is just say it'll be more than destroyers. It'll have customizable, upgradable interior features that cost resources as well, including some additional credit sinks for things like furniture or other small subsystems like healing pods, cloning pods, whatever people need.
Damn.
That's all I can really, that's all I can really say.
That's
Yeah.
epic.
Yeah, critique. A couple of questions. One is a question, and one's more like of an idea. One, when it comes to faction stations, so not the outpost, like faction stations, are we expected to like get that in the next year or so, or it'll be more recent?
That's a great question. I think that you can probably expect the bare bones mechanics of those things, kind of how we're doing with kind of what we're doing with player outposts right now, is that we're introducing the bare necessities of it, right? I imagine that several months down the line, we could potentially see faction stations start to emerge, but I can't really guarantee that. I think it depends on how productive this summer is. We are currently outlining, we're going to be having a roadmap meeting on Monday to outline the next 6 months of updates and how we want to proceed with the game. A lot of the updates that we're looking at are going to be oriented towards group content as opposed to solo content. That's our immediate priority.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, thanks
another
for that. Yeah.
Yeah. There is
and
also one thing that we need to fit in, which is we are behind on a very important thing, that being internal tools. There will be a month in there. I don't know if it's going to be during the summer or not, but there will be a month in there where we are going to focus solely on internal tools for developers to make sure that any updates that we do subsequently, so after the summer ends and people are less available, I want to make sure that it's a very streamlined process. So I know people won't be happy when we announce that update, but it will be better in the long term. And if we can get that out, it'll more than likely mean that we can tackle faction stations a lot earlier than we anticipate.
Will this include a mission editor, and will the mission editor be available to the public, or would it just be available to developers?
So yeah, it would include the mission editor, and the mission editor would be locked initially to me and Keth and any of the other higher devs, because we are being very we're being very cautious with how we approach missions. So it's determining how much lore we want to put into it, and also
not the word.
lore, no, and also
Lord,
determining how each mission will be categorized. A long time ago I pitched a quest system for the less important missions that kind of flesh out the world, get you introduced to sub characters. But then there are bigger things like faction-related quests that gain you reputation, and also having comprehensive storylines for each faction is another thing that I would like to do. when I talked to Keth initially, I said something along the lines of a 2 to 3 hour campaign for each faction. That would have a comprehensive narrative that would really flesh out each faction, give it a personality, and then of course sprinkle in some quests to.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Final
All right.
final question for now. Just will this extend to
Okay.
anomalies? Like, will the faction, will the quest editor be able to like make new anomalies and such, so that there's increased variation when you're just going out and you find like a drone factory, or maybe not a drone factory,
Yeah.
when you, but
Um,
you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think it would extend to things like that. So anomalies, there will be anomalies that are a bit more rare, and there will be also just unexpected encounters. So they won't necessarily be anomalies. I want to have things that you just encounter randomly in space. So that could come in the form of wildlife, for instance. Not to get too specific with that. Another thing is anomalies like abandoned stations. That is a concept that I've been talking to Keth about for a while now, where we would essentially have procedurally generated abandoned stations that are like mazes that you have to physically navigate. And, they will have valuable loot, of course, but it could also have some pretty interesting hostiles uh, resting within the depths of the station that as I kind of teased in the general chat, in the main general chat yesterday, once you hear them, you're probably already too late. So yeah, we have a couple of interesting ideas.
So just kind of
Okay.
bringing it back to outposts for a sec, because I think a lot of people here are here because for the most upcoming one. Because I love talking about speculation and what things might come, but I just want to kind of get the guarantees out of the way. So people are wondering, will these faction stations have the ability to defend themselves, and how will pirating them work?
So that is very much dependent on the state of affairs with Roblox. If Roblox, as a platform, enables us to have siege mechanics, we will absolutely commit to that. We can't commit to it right now because it is just not feasible at this current point. So, with that being said, I do think that stations will still have the ability to defend themselves, as there will be NPC threats that could attack a station. That is something that we've been looking at. It could also be under the umbrella of daily missions. And that'll apply not just to player faction stations, but also player outposts as well. So yeah, I do think they will have the ability to defend themselves. As for the combat associated with them, I think it'll end up being a very indirect form of combat initially, similar to how faction or player outposts work. Very indirect, but again, it depends on the state of affairs with Roblox, and if Roblox servers have the ability to facilitate things like siege mechanics, sure, why not? And better yet, if Roblox servers can facilitate that, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to add capturable systems outside of contested space. It's just not something that we can commit to in the current state of things.
Okay.
All right, so let's finally get around to the community after everybody had their bite at the question asking. How will Patreon affect like the development process, and are there any um, any benefits that you didn't mention in the video that you want to mention now?
Yes. How will Patreon help the development process? How will giving people money to do a thing make the thing go faster? It is an
It
age-old.
might incentivize them. Yeah, now that I think about it.
It might just make things move a lot smoother. Yeah, I am super proud of the Patreon. I think Patreon will be a great way to incentivize development. I'm already eyeing down Cove. Most of you know Cove as our first summer full timer. So Cove would be making a good bit of the money from the Patreon to just build more ships, more station stuff. Just that would be his summer thing. I am super optimistic that Patreon is going to work wonders for the game. Truly, I think Patreon could even be the key to getting another programmer on board. And if that was to happen, then I can't even begin to summarize the benefits that would ensue. It could be very game changing for the game itself. Yeah, totally. Very excited about the Patreon. As for the tiers, I pretty much summed up all the benefits. I think where I was a bit more hesitant was when it came to things like future tiers that we might add. That will be very much open to interpretation, and we'll be looking forward to what people say. I think if it's ever possible, we would love to have a merchandise tier where you would pay monthly and then we would send you stuff. I think that would be dope. I would love to have physical things like merch, or even like playing cards that are Starscape themed. Like the actual. We've talked about a card game before. Yeah, there are so many things that we want to do, and totally. I think people should just be open-minded, and we will listen to what our patrons have to say.
Yeah.
While we're on that topic, someone else, is the Patreon up yet, or are we still waiting on that?
We still have a lot of back-end stuff to figure out, like taxes, and also who we're going to be giving the money to, and how it's going to be split up. We need to make sure that we take that into account. We did get a pretty sufficient amount of interest from the general public, so we have an idea of how much money we would be making at the minimum, which I can't disclose for obvious reasons. But we have a general idea of what we're working with. So we want to make sure that we have all of the things prepared. This includes things like the developer podcast, the monthly podcast, because that will be part of the perks. Is if you pay $10, you'll be able to come onto the podcast live and ask your questions. So, yeah. And if any new perks get added, we'll just be sure to clarify it in a dev blog, and I will just post everything there and say, here's everything you can look forward to. Happy shopping.
All right.
So gonna quickly shoot the questions from some people. So one link into the Patreon, number one, is when is it suspected to come out? And the second one is of course, there is planned, as far as we're aware, to be a ship that is bigger than a destroyer. Perhaps an idea to get around people like mass inflating that, because right now everyone kind of uses destroyers. Perhaps with the faction stations, you could have cruisers that you need to have a faction station, and per faction station you have like a cruiser. Like how in EVE Online you can manufacture cruisers in this like massive station area. You can do the same sort of thing to like decrease the amount of cruisers in circulation, and also make it a lot harder to get.
Well, one thing I'm just going to say right now. Can you reserve that second part? I'll address the Patreon thing. Can you repeat the Patreon part of the question?
Basically, the
and I'll answer-
Patreon part was when is it suspected to come out? Like the Patreon.
Okay, so that's an easy answer. We're looking for a soft launch in May, which means that essentially we would just kind of launch it, post on the dev blog, say it's up, people can join, and then at a later date I will post a full-blown advertisement for it and start marketing to the public, and it will also be included in future videos at the end of on the end cards and stuff like that. But we're looking at a very soft May launch, so it won't be super hyped up immediately. That gives us time to actually gauge the influx of patrons and see what we're working with. As for the second part of your question, with the cruisers and stuff like that, larger ships, one possible modular thing that we were considering for faction stations was the possibility. Sorry, I have to yawn. I've been not breathing enough. One thing that I have been looking at is the possibility of having a shipyard. It would be something that you construct separate from the station, but in the same orbit slot as your faction station, and there people could build larger ships. That is one thing we have discussed. So yeah,
Thank you for that. That's very nice to know.
hopefully that's a
Alright.
sufficient.
If you're
Yeah.
adding that, will you guys be adding in like a tax if you build them in like core space, like if you're building like a frigate and whatnot?
Well, if we're making it attached to the faction station system, then by default it would be in wild space. So if it was linked to that, I don't know if it would be necessarily separate from that yet. You know, we're too far behind in order to kind of give you a precise answer on that. But who knows? Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. But I would like to see things like that.
Sorry. Okay. So on the subject of cruisers, one worry that I have is that we're basically just going to see them as bigger destroyers, which are basically bigger frigates. It's just basically a power creep with more ships, slower speed, more guns, more health. So is that going to change, or are we going to start seeing more like interesting kinds of ships, or is there going to be like a value in maybe using destroyers over cruisers in some kind, or is it basically just going to keep going where it's just bigger ships?
I sometimes wonder if there could be an NPC element to a lot of these cruiser ideas. I think having special mechanics, totally, like that would be cool. If maybe the cruisers could house, given a temporary resource, sink. If you put resources into it, the cruiser can house like NPC fighters that fight for your faction, use your faction skin or whatever. Like that is a concept that I've heard thrown around, which I like. But I'm not really worried about power creep because I think smaller support ships like bombers that will have the capacity to destroy larger ships, given a couple of bombing runs, I think that will help make that a bit less of a concern. Mostly because it comes back to making combat less linear with just bigger and bigger ships, and more about a combat loop where each ship has its own counterpart as well as its own prey. So I think yeah, I'm definitely not too concerned about power creep so long as we can have a diverse amount of ships that maybe serve more specific functions.
So you guys think that bombers and that sort of a thing, they will make it into the game?
Oh yeah, I think 100% like that's going to be this year. There is no way that we're not adding
That's
bombers in
sick.
this.
Does
Like,
this mean that fighters are going to get a damage nerf?
I won't answer that because I am not qualified to speak on behalf of our balancing team.
I see.
There's
It'll
like a
be
proper balance
evaluated.
meeting, yeah.
It'll be evaluated in testing for sure. We won't
Alright.
just release them without testing it against all of the other ships. Another thing we have to consider is how many bombers would it take to take out a larger ship, right? Like we would probably want to reenact some war games and see if what if we put 2 bombers or 3 bombers or 6 bombers against a destroyer. What is the feasible outcome of that combat situation, right? So we will be running a couple of tests to make sure that whatever we end up with in terms of a combat loop is extremely satisfying and will reward people who are skilled pilots more than anything.
Awesome.
Let's go back to the community. It's a lot. I've been pinning messages throughout panel chat here. Let's see. Oh yeah, about like multiplayer ships where multiple players are in one ship.
Yeah.
Will that like ever come around?
It's been discussed. It's like it's one of those things where when do you justify it, right? Because there's a lot of complications. I know technically I can't really speak to them myself because I'm not really in on the tech side of things. But I think generally we are not opposed to it. And if we do something like that, we will introduce it when the time is right and when it's warranted. One possibility, huge possibility that I had in mind was if we were to have transport carriers that could hold multiple people for ground engagements. That is something that I've toyed with for a while, and especially once we do the ground combat update, which I guess will be a part 1 situation, because we want to make it so that station combat, like within a station, is satisfying. It could come in tandem with that, but there's no guarantee. I guess it depends on the overall need of the player base at that time. If we have a pretty substantial population and a lot more people engaging, then absolutely, I don't see why not. It would be kind of fucking unfortunate, though, if you were flying a transport ship with 12 people inside of it and it got blown up. God rest all of those souls. So I don't know how we're going to account for that.
It's fine.
I don't know how we'll account for it just yet, but you know, it's something we've definitely discussed. So we'll just have to stay tuned and see where it factors in.
Just actually, never mind.
You wanna go first?
I mean,
I was just about to do like a comment, like maybe like there's a like a faction, depending on who was aboard that ship. There's like a faction relation nerf. Like you just immediately go to war with the faction you just blew up. Like because like if there's like 6 like Ferokan civilians aboard that ship, and you blow up the ship, you're now at war with the Ferokan Empire.
So, are you talking about things like player faction diplomacy?
What we were just talking about. All I heard was like transporting players.
It was
Oh, yeah.
carrier ships, like
So,
transports and all that.
If people are wondering, you know, I guess that's kind of a good segue into a player faction related thing. Another idea that we have is to add actual diplomacy mechanics to player factions beyond just tagging people as enemies and whatnot. I think having warfare justifications and things like that could be pretty sweet. So I think blowing up someone's faction transport and killing 12 of their guys, that would definitely be sufficient to trigger a war declaration.
May I
Wait,
ask
what was
a
that?
question
What was
on
that one World War One event which there's a bunch of American civilians aboard a transatlantic ship.
Oh yeah. What was
Remember
that?
the players screaming? Remember the Lusitania?
May I quickly add something to that?
Totally.
So if we have in-game like wars, like you formally declare in-game, will we then allow killing the other faction in something like police station or police systems, and not have Corsac intervene?
Ooh, that is a spicy idea. Can you message that to my DMs? And I can't comment on it now, but it's a cool idea. Just message it to my DMs. That's all I'll say.
Corsac just putting their hands back, like, no, we're not dealing
Feels
with
like
this.
it was
You guys
lifted
fight it
from-
out.
I have a question myself. So, a lot of people were worrying about new players and small factions like building up and such. So, I mean, this is what I'm suggesting here is just it's a common system like you've probably seen like Clash of Clans and other like MMO games, but just like a faction list they can look up, just search for factions and stuff that you want to join. Just give the player the tools necessary to join a faction on their own rather than having to be directly recruited by somebody with the perms.
Oh, absolutely. So I think having things like that are essential moving forward. I think that the current way that player factions operate, we are like I personally am a big believer in consolidating as many features as we can away from the Discord side of things and directly into the game. Things like distribution of resources as well as items. So, like if you want to equip your members with a certain type of armor or a certain type of rifle, you can stockpile it in your faction station and they can access it. You know, just I want to have more features like that. And when it comes to recruitment, I think also having actual player faction terminals where people can go and look up who's recruiting. Giving people the ability to purchase ad slots would be another possibility, like billboards and stuff. No, I'm totally all for it. I want to make it as accessible as possible so people don't have to spend all of their time making spreadsheets in Excel and posting
Oh.
ads on the main Discord. I think those things can still happen, obviously, but I just want to make people's lives easier because I think one of the biggest deterrents for factions right now is the organizational upkeep off platform, and it actually sometimes prevents people from enjoying the game, and that's just not cool. I want people to be able to. I want people to invest most of their time in the game, not making spreadsheets.
So what's
I
your
want
take
to-
on?
Oh
I
my
was just
God.
gonna. What's your take on faction territory, deep space, sort of wilds? Is that a
I-
possibility?
Currently, it is not really a possibility. Just based on if we're looking at the current game, it's not a possibility. If we can add some more features, it could be partially added in a way. But even then, I think my ultimate dream would be if Roblox does upgrade a little bit and allow us to facilitate what we truly want, which is siege mechanics, then yeah, I would happily support something like that. We definitely want to have capturable territory. It's not even a question. Like, it is something that we dream about, and we want to be able to do it. So, if the chance ever comes where we can figure out a way to partially integrate it and then expand on it later down the road, I think that is probably the best avenue to take. And we will definitely tell the community if we are ever looking at doing it, but we will only do it when we know it can work.
Okay.
I've got a question from the community. I have gone for a minute, so I don't know if this has been answered yet. But there's a question about how fuel efficient will the stations be that has been pinned. So like for example, you've got to go for a night. Of course, you got to sleep. So how long will if you refuel it? When will be the next time you need to refuel it? What's the maximum you can refuel it?
So if you have a station, let me speak to the player outpost specifically first. So if you are an individual and you are running a player outpost, you could feasibly leave your station for roughly 2 weeks before having to refuel it. This is just the base level station. Here's where that changes. So if you start upgrading your internal systems, such as your refinery, your factory, your storage, you will then start to use more power from your reactor, which means you're consuming more fuel. So, depending on how many things you want to have running in your outpost or station, that will be the determining factor. The same goes for faction stations. Now, faction stations will be modular, right? So they will have a lot higher demand when it comes to fuel consumption. So the best advice I would give anyone who's wanting to run a faction station is to focus on upgrading your fuel capacity first before you start leaning into the upgradability of your modules, because if you do the former, what will end up happening, or I guess maybe the latter, if you do the latter, what will end up happening is that you will be consuming more fuel than you are able to put into the station, and you could end up with a fuel deficit. So you have to be very careful about how you plan your faction station development. Otherwise, you'll end up having to fill up your station. I'd wager almost hourly. So make sure you're upgrading it. Make sure you're upgrading your fuel capacity, as well as your storage capacity. I'd say storage capacity and fuel capacity will be the two most essential things to upgrade in your stations or outposts.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
On one point I want to hit that I put on the kind of outline is so police systems, they're gonna have CorSec in them. I guess my personal question was I overheard that did you say that they were gonna be able to disrupt?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Are they gonna actually follow people?
So
will
they
they
will
actually pose an experience like a risk to an experienced player?
They will pose a risk to an experienced player. So if they warp in and they disrupt you, your best bet is to take out the ship that's disrupting you and then warp out, because there will be leeway between. I'd at least assume there would be leeway between destroying that ship and then having a moment where you can escape. It will be a threat, though. One of the things that I've been talking to Keth about is if it would be possible to have a proportional system. So if someone is pirating in a destroyer, then CorSec would respond based on the fact that you're using a destroyer. Or additionally, if you were, in a fighter, what would they respond with? Probably something that would counter a fighter. I don't want to have a situation where it's just an all-encompassing, a shit ton of destroyers warp out and attack you. Like, that to me is just overkill. I want it to feel pretty realistic in that, if it was a Paragon attacking a hauler, then when CorSec warps in, they're going to be there with a Corvette and a couple of other fighters, and they're going to have a measured response.
Will they
but
have
I,
tailored weaponry depending on what ship is there? Like for instance, if you're in a fighter, will there be like a flat Corvette coming in?
that could be neat, right? And that's part of the discussion. I don't know if it'll make it into the upcoming update, but we could easily just add it later on down the line. I think what we can expect is that whatever CorSec's response will be, it will be measured to a degree. I don't think it's just going to be a bunch of destroyers. I think that would be ridiculous, but we'll just have to wait and see what we can do. And if we can change it down the line, I think we're totally open to it. I think the most important thing is just having a system that works in general going into the relay update.
So as far as like warping, let's say I killed a hauler in a police system, right? And I'm like expecting these people to show up. I mean, everybody knows that they're going to show up with this kind of a comp. So I warp out, right? How far will CorSec follow me outside of those police systems? And, will they drop off or,
See, I actually don't really know the answer to that because I've yet to really flesh that out with Keth. I think it was just not. I forgot to include it in my list of things to ask, but I will check with him on that. But I can tell you what I would personally like to see if that helps.
Yeah.
I would love it if it was similar to like Grand Theft Auto, where you have like an amount of stars or something, and I think that should apply to all policed systems. And then you have to wait for it to wear off before you make another attack. Almost like a wanted level. So that would be my.
Sorry.
Oh,
So it would stay.
Oh, sorry.
Fucking GTA levels. We got CorSec throwing 12 destroyers at a Stratos.
Can we then have
were you gonna
CorSec
ask-
set bounties on people?
We could. I don't know if it would necessarily be like that, but it could use the same system. Like
Yeah, it would be like.
You don't want to accidentally print money though. That's the thing.
Yeah, we could pull from that system, and then we could retrofit it to accommodate that. So it wouldn't have to be exactly like it. But yeah, totally. Like those mechanics exist. So if we have systems that can be retrofitted to serve a new purpose, we love doing that. I think it's a great way to go, and it's not necessarily bad for development either.
Okay, so can we kind of turn the discussion to only the community about now?
Sure.
I've been trying to do that for the past hour.
Yeah, I am sorry because I just like I know that there's some really relevant questions in here. But I just kind of want to get to like a wrapping up stage over the next 15, 20 minutes. So if we could just Zip, I will entrust you. If you could just pick questions that you've pinned from the community, and then you'll be kind of like the sole speaker here. And you just want to, give those to critique and speakers can provide a little bit. But if the speakers could all just keep in mind that we're trying to wrap this up and just to keep replies short and speculation sort of out of the question. All right. Thank you.
All right, you crazy fucks. Start throwing questions in now, but I'll start from the back of the line. Unless Critique wants to answer them directly in the chat. If he answers it directly in the chat, lucky for you. So let's see. I think we talked about this, but I want to reiterate this again. Will outposts be able to protect themselves with turrets, or will you need to manually defend them?
I guess it depends on the actual thing you're defending from. So if we're talking about people who are waiting outside of your station to ambush you, yeah, you'll have to defend yourself initially. But in the future, we do plan to add features that you can put on as like external subsystems that will defend you and your station from hostiles. This includes something like an uplink, which when you construct it, it summons NPCs to your station, right? And then as you upgrade the uplink, you can change what type of ships are summoned. It would probably be associated with your like faction alignment or something. But for player factions, we might adjust it so that way you can choose what ships come and they just use your player faction skin. Other things that we would do would probably be things like gun platforms that would help secure your passage out of the system if you're trying to haul fuel or something like that. So there are a couple of things we could definitely do to make it so you could defend your station. But in this initial update, you'll be on your own.
All right. There's definitely. Here's one. Like, will you be able to clone at outposts with either your own or someone else's?
So yeah, if you we are talking about making it so that you can have multiple cloning pods in your outpost, and you can whitelist the people that you whitelist will be able to set their spawn in your outpost. So that is definitely a possibility. And I guess that answers the former, which is yeah, you will be able to clone at your outpost.
All right. How many anchor slots are you gonna like see around a planet? Is there going to be a limit?
I think it depends on the size of the planet, maybe, or even if we decide to get into like the minutia, like the type of planet. I would say a safe bet is between 3 and 5. And if you have, a system with multiple planets, then that would easily stack up to be quite a few. You might end up with a couple of neighbors for sure.
All right. Let's see. Scrolling through, seeing if I can find a good question. Will uh will you have like defense platforms outside? No, outside of your like main station, like kind of like the ones in contested where you have I yeah, like sort of in like contested systems where you have defense platforms surrounding generators. Will you have like that sort of thing um defending your station?
Yeah, we will definitely have smaller structures that you can make to defend your station that will be separate from the actual station itself. Totally.
Another one I'm going. This one's more recent. Do you have to like, if say you don't have any ships at your locals? Because actually, let me ask the first question. Stations do have local storage, correct?
Yeah, so stations have local storage, but they will use a global system for your ships because I don't think it is. I don't think it's very beneficial to have local storage for ships or anything like that. I think I think if you get to your station in a hauler, you should be able to leave in a fighter if you want. Otherwise, it gets really messy and not
All
fun.
right.
We don't want to be tedious in that capacity. If we're going to have any tedious elements, it should be uh, centered around gameplay itself, not not things like just trying to spawn your ship and do a different activity because you decided you don't want to haul anymore. Like imagine you have to fly your hauler all the way back to secure space just to swap out into a fighter and then go back to your station. Kind of defeats the purpose of having the station, really.
Fair enough. Let's see.
I do see one that I would like to answer about NPC crew crew
Yeah,
members.
that one. I pinned that one. You can
Um,
answer it right now.
I would love to answer it because what we envision for crew members is much more, I think, much more palatable than what we previously intended. Crew members didn't serve much of a function originally maybe they gave you a couple of bonuses. But in this case, crew members will be essential if you want to reduce the energy requirements of some subsystems. So they will actually serve a proper gameplay purpose this time around, beyond just being filler that walks around your station. I should also tack onto that, since I talked about, energy saving improvements. Someone also asked a question about things like solar panels. So stations run on a generator which is powered by a fusion reactor. And I think the fusion reactor is a great source of energy, but I think it would be cool to also have exterior modules where you attach some solar panels and it helps increase your energy output. So that is also definitely going to happen at some point.
Cool. Let's see. How much would it be to like max out an outpost, like get all of the things, or is it too early to tell what you're gonna have on the outpost for you to give a definite answer?
Definitely too hard to tell at the moment. I don't think I'm even qualified to give that answer. I'm going to leave that to the balance people. But I think if you want to have a fully decked out outpost, it'll be an investment for sure.
All right. Will outposts be able to orbit around moons or be inside rings, or will they be exclusively in specific orbits?
I guess it depends on the nature of the orbit slot. We could do a moon if we wanted to. Yeah, I won't say no to it. It's not going to happen in this update though, but I won't say no to it in the future. I like to keep things
All
open.
right. Will you be able to? This one's gonna be. Will you be able to board and sabotage outposts of other players?
Nah, if you want to board someone's outpost, you have to be whitelisted. That is the essential criteria. That being said, if the outpost has no shield around it, you won't be able to board it still, but you can destroy it from the outside.
All right. Jesus Christ! I don't know why I pinned these. These are suggestions.
It's all good. Whatever.
Zip pinned a message to this channel. See all pinned messages. Jesus. Oh, here's a fun little kicker. It's not supposed to be serious, but will forklifts have any ground potential? Will forklifts ever be in the game?
Forklifts are going to be in the initial update. We thought it'd be funny, so we're just going to do it.
Very
You'll be
cool.
able to get forklift certified. Be able to drive your forklift around the docking bay level, and you'll be able to put more than likely skins on your forklift. And ironically, it means that forklifts will be the first ground vehicle in Starscape. So I guess there's also
You're
that.
gonna be shitting me.
Yeah, I know it's something, isn't it? Oh,
I did not expect that answer.
yeah, I know, right? It's I'm a big fan of it too. I think there's a lot
Would
of
this
potential.
increase your hauling capacity?
You know what? I was wondering if we could attach it to even our storage capacity, just as a little boost. It would be funny. Not sure off the top of my head though if it would be able to connect to hauling, but you know what? We'll look into it and see if we can get it a mechanic beyond just being a meme. Because right now, I won't lie, we're basically adding it because it's funny and it's easy. So that is the essential purpose of it, and I think people will
Also,
get.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Let's see.
I mean, also
sorry.
infrastructure for ground vehicles.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be too
Um,
hard just to take this code and put it onto a proper ground vehicle. So
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
racetrack would be really fun, where you just have little race cars.
Who knows?
All right. I think Zip, why don't you do one more and then we'll wrap this up. And yeah.
Ah, damn! I only get one more. Hold on. Can we do two more so
We're
everybody got?
like 30 minutes past when we wanted to end. Do we want to we only got but
All
go
right.
for
All
it. Two
right.
more? That's sick. It's fine.
Let's go with. Will there be NPC ground enemies in the future?
Hmm. Yes.
Very cool.
I can talk more about it if you want.
You can talk more about it if you want.
You don't
Yeah.
have to if you don't really
You know
know.
what? I am totally cozy revealing this. I think this is fun. We already have. I'm choosing my words carefully here because I want to save. I want to save big stuff for the direct videos, right? But let's see. We already have constructed a finalized model for a drone ground NPC.
Wasn't that in the dev blogs like 3 years ago?
It is not that. This is a completely new thing, and its functionality is already determined. And all I can say is that it is a terrifying opponent. And if you are lucky to catch a glimpse of it when you engage it, then good job. You're part of the few.
And then
Master speaking.
I think this is going to be the last question, which will be a shame. But will there be discuss like solar panels and stuff as like an auxiliary kind of thing to your power source to your reactor?
I actually did confirm that. So if you want to ask a different question as your last question.
Yeah, I probably should have paid attention instead of cry about panel chat.
Just to recap, though, for anyone who might have missed it, if the question was asked again, yeah, we want to have a solar panel add-on, and it will boost the amount of power that your station generates collectively. And it will mostly be an improvement in tandem with the fusion reactor, which will already be, generating copious amounts of energy.
All right, let's just give a couple minutes. Everybody, if you hurry up, spit a question real quick in panel chat before I ask one. You get 5 seconds.
People are talking.
They're all trying to type as fast as they can now.
And they're all typing. All right.
Will there ever be a mini player shield for
This
the
is a
drone
meme.
master?
Why did I do this? All right, I'm just gonna pick one.
Oh my god.
Here we go.
A lot of questions.
This is a chonky hell of a question. What
Let's
do you
do
do to plan? What do you plan to do to support the community? The dev team is working to make things in game, but what are your ideas on supporting like community servers and community kind of projects?
I think there's limits to what we can do when it comes to third-party stuff. But we are working on a possible solution for a faction-specific server that would host possibly tournaments that would go on the YouTube channel. I think the most important thing that we can do to support the community is recognize the community. So doing a lot more things for recognition is my immediate answer to that question. Obviously, I am also involved in a lot of the community servers directly to the extent that I can be. But yeah, hopefully that's a sufficient answer. We definitely want to just start to recognize the community a little bit more. Now, when it comes to affiliations, we want to keep. We're very protective of affiliations, especially as we start to tread into the money territory. So we do have to be careful. But I think having a server for factions is part of my first initial plan to expand my reach into the community.
That kind of makes me worried, but it depends on how you do it.
Oh, no, don't worry. It's going to be a very impartial thing. I'm going to be running it first and foremost, so a developer will be there, and it will enforce the same rules as the main Starscape Discord. It'll just be a place where people can convene to talk about faction-related things. I anticipate that it'll be a lot more moderated than the previous stuff that we've done in the past. I think keeping the factions in their own kind of server hub, though, is generally a good idea.
Summon Newton. He is needed.
But yeah, that's my. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Anything
I think
else?
that's going to be the last of the questions, unless
I don't
we
mind
have time for another one.
because I saw one that was really good.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
go for it.
Depends how much
Okay.
time
Go
you
for it.
have,
It's your show.
I guess.
So someone said it was about ground combat. I'm just trying to find where it was.
Is it ground revamp?
Yeah, will there be a ground revamp, new tools, more cover, etc.? The answer to that is yes. There will be a ground revamp, and it will take place. It will take place possibly sooner than you expect.
Like tomorrow.
Are we
We
turning
want-
Starscape into a
Don't
cover
get
studio?
people's hopes up, Critique. They'll be disappointed again.
Hey, look,
This will happen next year.
the best way to curb people's expectations is to not give them anything to expect. So I won't give you a timeline on it other than it could be sooner than you expect. And that, I guess, is subjective to the individual based on their own expectations. Now, that being said, some really useful things that we want to incorporate into our ground update. We have someone already working on complete redesigns of all the armor. Or not
Seen that.
redesigns. I should say we are making fresh armor. So a lot of the stuff that you're currently familiar with, unless it's really good like the Marine, probably won't make it into an update. We're definitely going to be leaning more towards original designs that are specific to the lore. I should also clarify that guns will be receiving a change as well. So a lot of the weapons that currently exist in the game may not make it in past the ground update that we do. So it's going to be very refreshing for a lot of people. They are almost certainly going to be in a situation where they have to kind of refamiliarize themselves with ground combat because it'll be so wildly different from what currently exists. In the sense that it'll be sufficiently better, to say the least. I want a system that actually has a proper ground combat HUD comparable to what we have with ships in space at the moment. I also want to have constructible objects. So one thing that we already have built, actually, here's a fun little tidbit. One thing that we have already constructed is an anti-infantry turret that you deploy on a tripod. That exists. And to construct all of these things, we are also going to have a fabricator. So there will be a lot of good stuff on the horizon for ground combat. I'm really excited to get into it.
I can't wait for the Eclipse crossover.
That
would be awesome.
I think that will be it for today.
Cool.
Sorry, everybody who didn't get their questions answered.
I'd like to thank Critique for taking the time to come join us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, yes.
Sorry for the
Thank
rocky
you.
start, man.
No,
Sorry.
it's all good. I was expecting it to go on to 6:30, so I was prepared. But I am going to be
Yeah.
helping a friend. I'm going to be helping a
Alright.
friend move today. So wish me luck.
Yeah,
Good luck.
Thank you
Fuck.
for dealing with all the shenanigans in panel chat.
No problem. I look forward to the next one. Just let me know whenever that might be. But next direct video for everyone who's present. The next direct video will be the first weekend of June, and I have a very exciting reveal. And it won't be related to group combat per se. It'll be its own thing, but it's something that I don't think anyone here can predict, and it has been done for approximately 1 month now. So I'm just kind of sitting on it. But
You can't just say that and not tell us
Oh,
what it is.
You
well,
bastard.
I-
Yes, I can.
You can
won't-
say that.
it won't be anything that is a physical like update kind of like stations. It's going to be something else. Could be graphic design related, could be anything really.
It's
Just
the
not
Lego.
a
They changed the logo. That's it.
Oh no.
It's the
We've
logo
already-
change.
But yes.
We're going to see
Look
Starscape
forward
on
to it. Yeah, look forward to it. It's going to be
Space
great.
is space bar.
It's going to be very game changing for the brand, I guess would be one way to say it. Starscape is about to be a very unique game as a byproduct of it, and something that'll help distinguish it from every other game on the platform, or at least most.
Awesome.
So,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. I'll set that up with you when we get nearer to that, and we can do this again, hopefully with less of
Whatever
technical
happened at the
errors.
start.
Thank you for critique and then thank you for all the speakers, and thank you for everybody who stuck around, and thank you for YQ for recording it. I don't know when we're gonna put this up, probably over the next couple days. I think we'll get an article out and include some of the facts in the next Celestial. Yeah, thank you. This is it.
Thank you.
My
And,
pleasure.
yeah, absolutely.
All right.
See you later.
everybody.